Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. A warm welcome to the Expert Edge Masterclass, proudly brought to you by Shine.com. We are thrilled to have you with us today for an insightful session on GraphQL for full stack development from front end to backend. GraphQL has revolutionized how modern applications handle data by offering a more flexible and efficient alternative to REST APIs with its declarative data, fatigue, strong typing, and real-time capabilities. GraphQL empower developer to build scalable, high-performance application across various platforms. In today's tech landscape, understanding GraphQL is a game changer for developers aiming to optimize API performance, reduce over fetching and under fetching of data and seamlessly integrated front end and back end technologies. Before we begin, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Preeti Dangwal, your host, and now it's my pleasure to introduce someone with deep expertise, Mr. Subramanian Murugan. Mr. Subramanian is a freelancer trainer in Java, JEE technologies, and front-end engineering technologies. He has conducted training program across multiple locations including Chennai, Bangalore, Coimbatore, Hyderabad, Mysore, Dubai, Pune, Kolkata, Gurgaon, Noida, Muscat, UAE, and Singapore. With over 15 years of industry experience, he has delivered 240 plus classroom sessions, training more than 6,500 participated and conducting a total of 8,799 plus hours of training as of November 2017. His expertise experience has helped professionals across industries enhancing their technical skill and stay ahead in their evolving world of software development. His impressive clientele include top tier organizations such as Walmart, American Express, Bank of America, TCS, Sony, Airbus, Dell Technologies, and many more. This is your chance to learn from an industry expert, so stay engaged, ask questions, and take note. The insight you gain today will help you strengthen your skill in GraphQL and accelerate your journey as a full stack developer. Without further delay, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Subramanian Murugan. Over to you, Mr. Subramanian.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Preeti. Yeah. Hi, good evening. Welcome to GraphQL session. So this is Subramanian Murugan, as Preeti told me about myself. So we are directly jump into the technology stack. Okay. Let me start sharing my screens. So meantime, I'm going to stop video for a better presentation. So let's go with the video later on, and I'm going to start sharing my screen once again. So in this presentation, actually, I'm going to talk about actually what is GraphQL and why GraphQL and GraphQL specifications, what type of apps you can build by using GraphQL. Okay, let me start sharing my screen. Okay, hopefully you are able to see my screen. Yes.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So most of you, I hope actually most of you people come from minimum of 2 years experience from IT. Okay. You may come from actually different tech stack. You may come from backend technologies, or you may come from front end technologies as well. So in background, you may come from a Java, or you may come from actually other background like a .NET or PHP or Python, whatever it is. And also you may come from front-end technologies. You may be a mobile developer, or maybe you may be a web developer. So whatever developer background you are coming from, so the GraphQL really suits for you. If you are actually yeah, guys, it is a recorded session. Preeti, you can tell about the recording stuff people are asking.
Yeah, sure. I will share the link as well with everyone.
So now, generally speaking, when you are going to understand any new technology, first you need to understand about why should I learn this, okay? Or why is the technology is all about, okay? The first pointer, you need to understand about what, okay, why and how. So what, why, how. So these three questions, if you are able to understand, I mean, for these questions, if you are able to understand, you can understand about the technology landscape. Okay. Fundamentally, you can think of what is GraphQL. So what is GraphQL? So GraphQL, the word GraphQL, I will decode later. But in one word, what is a GraphQL? Means a GraphQL is a API standard. Very simple. One word I can say is an API standard, or a GraphQL is an API standard. What do you mean by API? First, you need to understand what is API. So API is nothing but application programming interface. I mean, without API, no software exists. Am I right? If you look at API, means actually is an interface. Okay. So interface for application. Okay. The interface for application. So when you look at any software system, if you take, there is an API, right? But the question is actually how this API can be designed, how to design API. So how to design API. So the API, how to design, the API is a generic word. API is a very generic word. So API is nothing but what? Is an interface for an application. Okay. That you need to understand about an API. So when we think about API, how to design API, that you need to understand. If you look at from the traditional technology, I mean, if you go back 30 to 40 years, I'm talking about 1970s, from 1970s, 80s, those times actually, there was different programming languages. I mean, if you want to understand even API, you have to understand about the programming languages, right? You know, because using programming language only, we are going to design API. So very simple. Using programming language, you are going to design API. Using programming language, you design API. So the programming languages, if you look at, follow some kind of principles. Am I right? Follow some kind of principles. Based on that principle only, the languages exist. For example, the most popular principles are, um, I mean, in the old principles, if you look at procedural, procedural oriented, and object oriented, procedural oriented, object oriented, and functional programming. So there might be a number of programming styles or paradigm, we can say. But actually today, if you look at object oriented is most popular one, you know very well. But even functional programming also very popular. So the functional programming is a very legacy. I mean, the first programming principle is a functional programming. So whatever the programming style you are going to follow, so in every style you have an API. So that's what I would like. I mean, you can design API using any style, okay, any style. But in modern days, if you look at, most popular is called object oriented. So in object oriented, the fundamental building block is what? Object, right? The fundamental building block is object. So object is created out of class. Hopefully you know very well. So object and classes. So what actually the object contains? The object contains two things. I mean, we encapsulate actually two things called data plus what? How to operate the data. How to operate the data. So this how to operate the data is technically called as what? Methods, functions. Okay. Yeah, so that's what we call as. But generically, this we call as an API. That is very interesting thing. So object encapsulate data and how to operate that data. So that means the data is represented methods and functions. So technically, which is called as an API. So API is nothing but in a generic word is called methods. Okay, those methods actually encapsulated inside object. For example, if you come from a Java or a C++ or a C Sharp, so generally how that API being designed. For example, I have a class. The class is called product class, okay, or you can say a product service class. In the product service class, you may have actually API called find all API. So this API just actually is going to return just I'm writing a generic code, okay, return products. So this is actually the design. Then this is an API. You see that find all is an API. You understand, right? Okay. So now when we think about objects, object contains an API and data. And so when we are going to, so generally how that APIs are invoked, how to access or use or invoke API, how to access or invoke API. So listen carefully, any language, if you look at any programming language uses a runtime, right? For example, I'm going to take actually the Java runtime, Java as an example. So the Java runtime we call as a JVM, okay? JVM, or if you take a C++ or a C language, it also has a runtime. Or if you take actually Python also has its own runtime. And if you take a .NET also, it has its own runtime. Every programming language is having its own runtime. On top of that runtime, actually we run our code. The code is actually called in case of Java, the Java application is collection of objects, you know very well. The object is having an API. You understand, right? So now this API, if you look at how this API can be invoked. For example, if I have a one object called product service, and if I want to call that object, you have to call from object, another object or another program. You understand, right? So let us say actually if you are going to call an API, so within on the same VM, the same Java virtual machine or same Java object, we have another API. So this API, using that API, you are going to call that API. So this is actually called as API invocation. Okay, API invocation. So this is a design how that API. When you are invoking an API, this API is going to return the data back to this API. So very simple fundamental idea. One object of another object of API is going to call an API of another object. So which is going to call another. You have to call from another program or object. Then you will get it. So now you understand about the fundamental design of API. So imagine if the if API are called within runtime. So this API is called local API because APIs are called within runtime. So within runtime, there is no issue. Objects are talking each other, and objects, how they can talk each other by calling an API. Imagine if you are going to think about, because today in modern days, the programs are running not within one single machines or a single runtime. So the machines which are running in a remote machines. Okay. So if the remote system. So that means actually the object of another JVM, think about it. This may exist in one single place or a different place. Then this object, this API is going to call each other. So now when we look at actually two different VM, but this VM may exist in the same machine or it may exist in a different machines. So this programming model introduced in 1970s, okay, not in Java, it was introduced in C itself. So that means two different programs are going to talk over network. Okay, so network is involved. If network is involved, APIs are talking over network. That APIs are called a remote API. So if API calls called outside runtime, if APIs are called outside runtime, okay, so those APIs are called remote APIs. Okay, remote API. So remote API means it involves protocols. Then it involves actually data transfer patterns like serialization, serialization, deserialization, and many more things are involved. And also the data formats and many more concepts involved. So this is what we call as a remote API. You know very well today actually the remote API are very popular, very popular. So why I'm telling, if you come from the technologies like Java, you might definitely you might be a microservice developer. You might be a microservice developer, whatever technology you are from, or you might have heard about microservices, right? Yes. So all microservice architecture based on this remote APIs only. So remote APIs are very popular nowadays. Nowadays. So how to design actually remote API? How to design remote APIs? Design remote APIs. So this is actually called as RPI technology, remote procedure invocation. Remote procedure invocation. So this is the technology called remote procedure invocation. So in the beginning, I'm talking about before 1989, there was a technology called TCP based RPA. TCP based RPA technology. TCP based RPA technology. So where actually the RPAs, I mean remote procedures or APIs are talking over actually the remote procedures are going to talk over TCP protocol. But this is become very popular after 90s actually. I mean from 1997 from 1997 HTTP based RPA. So that is the technology called web services. Okay. So initial web service is nothing but very simple. Two programs are going to talk over HTTP. Okay. So now if you look at actually the web services initially called XML based web service. What do you mean by XML based web service? The data format. I mean, this web service are classified based on data. XML based web service. So which is actually otherwise called as SOAP web services. Okay. So where actually the web services, how they can talk means, so when we design API, so remote API, so which is having a business logic, okay, which defines all the business logic of a particular domain. For example, you have a product service, how to return all products, how to save product, and how to update product, and also how to delete product. Okay, and these APIs are invoked over web by the client, over web, I mean via over HTTP plus SOAP protocol, So the clients will call this API. The API will send the data not actually as a Java object XML. So then actually the other end application, they will receive an XML. They will convert XML into other format what they are interested. So in case of RPA, network-based RPA, I mean remote API, RPA model, uh, the program actually, the server program, I mean who are providing data, can be different technology. The clients can be a different technology, but how the client and server they can talk each other means by using a common language called the XML. So after I mean this after SOAP based web service became very popular, remote APIs become very, very popular. I mean, many systems developed based on this technology only. Without API, I mean, RBA based API, no technology exists today, including the latest technology called artificial intelligence, right? So this technology also does not exist without actually APIs. Okay, and the second API model was introduced called REST-based web service. So here we need to talk about the REST-based web service. Even today, REST-based web service is more popular. So what is the advantage over XML-based web service? REST-based web service, XML-based web service actually, or SOAP-based web service, the return and I mean you can transfer between two application. You can transfer only XML. So that is one of the biggest drawback of that RPA model. Okay, one of the biggest drawback. I mean, the different data formats you cannot use. That's where REST came into picture. Okay, REST came into picture. What is the role of REST means? The REST proposed in a model. So the web service, an RPA, I mean, having an API, this API can send different types of data. So whatever the data the client is expecting. So for example, if I want XML, it will return XML. If I want JSON, it will return JSON. If I want data in other format like PDF, yes. So any data format, if you want actually the data will be returned from the XML. So the REST actually is the most popular de facto standard in API technology. Okay, API technology. So but actually these technologies, if you look at web service based technology itself, had some limitations. So that a new technology was introduced called the MOM technology, message oriented middleware technology. I mean, in the web service based API technology, there is a drawback. What is the drawback? The API, for example, this object is going to call, or this system is going to call this API. The API should exist the moment you call it. If the API does not exist, then actually you cannot communicate. And the second concept is actually when you are going to make an API call, this is going to be actually a synchronous API. So people interested actually called asynchronous API. That's where MOM based technologies came into picture. I mean the same API technology, but they never talk directly. So for example, I have an API is going to get the product data. So this guy wants product data, but they never talk directly. Rather than they talk via a centralized message broker. Today, if you look at, is the most popular technology, message oriented middlewares. I mean MOM technology. So this is also one of the API technology I'm talking. This is also remote API, but this remote API based on actually the message brokers. Today, you know very well, there is a technology called the event driven architecture. I mean, event-driven architecture. In microservices, this architecture is called event-driven microservices. Most popular message brokers, Kafka. So you know very well. So Kafka plays a vital role in modern API technology. So what is the difference between RPA-based API and MOM-based API? MOM-based API, they never talk directly, so that it is going to give you loosely coupled pattern. Okay, and MOM is going to give you actually a nice decoupling between these two technologies. Okay, so like Kafka based event driven uh, uh, Kafka based event driven API. So now you see that we are looking at different API technologies. We have seen the history behind API. Okay, now I told actually in the beginning, GraphQL is a API standard, but I never talked about in this API history, GraphQL, where it fits. Is it a new API standard like XML based, REST based, or MOM kind of? Is it a new? No, it is not a new, but it is going to actually alternate to REST based. Uh, it is an alternate to REST based web service. What do you mean by alternate? Alternate. Why? Then there must be some drawback in REST. Am I right? Then there must be some drawback in REST-based API model, REST-based API or REST-based API. So there must be a drawback. So that's what actually a new technology was needed. Yes. So what was actually the drawback? What was the drawback? So what is the drawback? So in the REST, we'll talk about actually a REST-based application. So what is the drawback in the REST-based model? I mean, the REST has been designed to be user-centric rather than data-centric, guys. I mean, very simple. This GraphQL invented by Facebook in 2012. Facebook, the company who was working with complex API technologies. You know very well how big the Facebook system is. So when we look at actually how the REST applications are designed, you have to understand about the design principles behind REST. So when we are going to design a REST, first actually you need to find out a domain. So that is the first uh, domain selection. Okay, domain selection is nothing but, for example, if I'm going to design API to API goal is what? Data transfer. Very simple. For example, in e-commerce domain, I have a product. Okay, so now I have a product domain. So now inside product, what I'm going to do, I'm going to design APIs. For example, find all product, find by ID product, find by ID, and save. Okay, there is a API called save method. So like actually, if I'm going to say save and update and delete. So now again a new product a new domain I'm going to introduce. Then again I have to design a new API and again new domain, new object and new API. So that means I have to introduce for each domain actually I need to introduce various APIs. So this is going to become very, very complex. Why? Because uh, the scalability point of view, if you look at, whenever the domain need changes, I need to redesign our API model. And moreover, actually, there was a various user need. What was the user need? What was the user need? User need is nothing but the developer need or the requirement. For example, when Facebook was working in 2012 and 13, you know very well, that time mobile computing became very, very popular. I mean, that time, mobile computing started becoming very popular. So 2010, 11, 12 and all, there are two major technologies. One is a web technologies become very popular and primarily mobile. So if, for example, if your REST API, if it is a REST API, now I want to design desktop based browser based application. Okay, and also I need to design mobile application. Imagine the mobile application and the desktop based browser based application, they have to talk to your APIs. So now actually there was actually one requirement Facebook faced. For example, in the desktop based application, you are going to call the product API. Imagine find all API. So in the find all, it is going to return so many fields. For example, the find all is going to return a JSON. The JSON is having actually 15 fields. Imagine 15 fields, but the all 15 fields we are going to use inside web, where we are using inside actually the web browser. But when we are designing mobile application, I don't need all the 15 fields. I need only, let us say, 7 fields only I need it. But 7 fields only I need it for mobile application. But for browser based application, I need actually 15 fields. But the REST API, what it is giving, whether you are asking actually 15 fields or 7 fields, when you invoke the find all, it returns all complete payload. So this is what the point number one is called. REST has not been designed to be user centric. rather than data centric. I mean, for example, I want only 7 fields, but my API is giving 15 fields. I don't need rest of the fields. You understand, right? Rest of the 8 fields I don't want. But still your API is giving data. I mean, the API is transferring data over network to the mobile application. Unnecessary fields also will, at that time you know very well how was the data. I mean, the internet speed and all is very less in the mobile phone, right? Suppose if you are going to dump the data into the mobile device, then the mobile application need to process the data. The mobile application need to process the data. So that means a very simple one word I can say in real time. For example, what I want, they don't give. So they give everything, then they ask you actually to filter. You understand, right? What you want. So I can give you everything, whatever you want, you go and select it. So this approach is one of the failure of REST, because the REST actually is not a data centric, rather than user centric. It gives you a complete data set. So from that data set, you have to filter it. So this is one of the drawback Facebook faced. Why? Because Facebook actually, when they started designing their system, okay, their system actually, they don't want all data, but they want only the data what they want. So REST actually they felt actually was not a suitable for them. Okay, this is one of the drawback. So that means the primary drawback of REST is what? Data. The data, it will give you what? More data. But you may be thinking, okay, why can't I design okay, now you may be thinking, why can't I design actually a new API for mobile? Am I right? For example, one API for desktop, another API for mobile. You don't believe people used to do that. I mean, people actually built this kind of API in the beginning. I mean, there would be like, the endpoints would be like this. Yeah, I mean, M equal to mobile API. I mean, API slash mobile, and API slash actually desktop. Like, people had their own namespaces. Think about, guys, do you think that this is going to be a good idea? I mean, maybe it is a good actually for segregation, but think about in a scalability point of view. If your business is changing, again, what you need to do, you have to introduce another API. So another API, I mean, another resource you have to. So at the end of the day, if you look at code maintenance, will be nightmare. I mean, so much code would be there. You are dumping code, and at the end of the day, you will not able to manage the code. So much code, then actually it will create a fed up. And and if any changes you are bringing, imagine a new business requirement you are bringing, new business requirement is adding in your API, then you have to update, not only in mobile, you have to update in desktop. So that means actually, or else if you don't want, then you have to use a versioning system. You have to use versioning. Yes, actually, I mean, it wouldn't make any difference nowadays, but that time if you look at data, I mean, internet, the speed is very less if you send actually the data over wire, right? Heavy data if you send, even mobile phones having a very less memory and processing speed. If you send actually much more data, the processing capacity will increase, so the battery will get drained. So the designing, if you look at, you have to give a crispy data. What data they want exactly, they will fetch the data and extract the data. Then, so even if you send even extra one field also would be actually a problem. Okay. So Okay, so this is actually the fundamental idea. So how actually, what is the drawback of REST? Similarly, we have a many the problem with respect to actually what I can say user centric, and also that's where actually the since REST was not able to solve all type of user business requirement, the Facebook was looking another solution to get the data based on user centric, not based on data centric, based on not based on data centric, so user centric. So that means what data I want, I have to get it. So that's where actually the Facebook, invented a new technology called GraphQL. A new technology called GraphQL. So what is a GraphQL? A GraphQL is a new API standard. So which is going to give you data based on user need. Clear? So GraphQL is a new API standard. So that API standard is an alternate to REST API. So that API is going to give you, the data what you want, and moreover, actually, okay. So that's the the history of GraphQL. Okay, so now if you look at in the GraphQL, how the application, I mean, how we can start designing GraphQL. You know very well in REST actually, in REST we have CRUD operations. How do you map it? The endpoints, or we can say called APIs, are mapped over HTTP, that mapped against HTTP verbs like get, post, put, and delete. So this is what we call as endpoints. But in case of GraphQL, so this endpoint, how it can be designed, so it is a completely different story. In GraphQL, there will not be a URL, so there will not be multiple URL, because in GraphQL, there is only one endpoint. But in case of REST, actually, we have a multiple endpoints. So many endpoints. Okay, for each resource, there is a separate endpoint. As I mentioned, /API /customer, /API /product, /API, /API /customer, and /API/products. Okay, like many endpoints. But in case of GraphQL, there will not be many endpoints. There will be only one endpoint. There will be only one endpoint. Behind the scene, actually, there would be a same web application, but how the data is returned means in GraphQL, the data is actually represented as an object. If you send any request to the GraphQL will return the data back to you as a JSON. But how they will return the data? How they will return data? So the data will be returned based on a special language used inside GraphQL is called query language. I mean, query language is nothing but SQL-like language, SQL like language syntax used actually to filter data. So this is actually a kind of a pattern. I mean, whatever the request you are giving. Okay, in GraphQL actually, the REST CRUD operations, how it is mapped means, the CRUD operations, they call actually mutation. There are three classification. Query means to read, and mutation means actually insert, update, delete. Okay, but extra one is called a subscriptions. Okay, subscription. This is actually query only, query with streaming. Query with streaming. This is actually interesting technique which you may not aware. I mean, if you come from reactive programming background, this technology you might understand. But actually, the core fundamental, the CRUD operations in GraphQL is implemented through things actually query and mutations. Okay. So okay, guys. Now we okay. I understood actually we understood what is GraphQL and why we go for GraphQL. Okay, you may have a doubt. Okay, so I want to start actually programming with the GraphQL. How do I start with the programming with the GraphQL, right? So whether you are connected internally or externally, there are need based. I tell you actually that need based. Okay, and need based. Need based is actually if your system is more dynamic, data driven, then you can go for GraphQL. And if your system is not data driven, so if it is a fixed, then you can go with you know REST API. Okay, let's begin with actually I'm going to talk about how to begin with the GraphQL programming. So if I want to begin with the GraphQL programming, where to begin? If you look at the GraphQL, first you need to understand there are two areas in GraphQL, not like REST. REST is so easy. So there are two areas you need to understand. I mean, there are two specs available in GraphQL. Two specs available. One is client-side spec, and the second one is called server-side spec. I mean, what do you mean by client-side? For example, I'm a GraphQL, I'm a client-side developer. Maybe I may be a web developer, I may be a mobile developer, or I may be a microservice developer. So I can be any type of developer. So how do I work with GraphQL means? For that, there is a spec called GraphQL query language specification. I mean, I can give you a reference. So GraphQL query language specification. So that you need to understand the GraphQL query language specification. So that actually you have a website called GraphQL. This is actually going to explain from the client side developer point of view. Okay. And if I'm a server side developer, for example, I'm a backend developer. I am developing microservice. So I'm developing actually a monolithic application. I'm already a REST API developer, or I'm actually a gRPC developer, or primarily I'm a REST API developer. Then what should I know how to begin means? There is a one more specification called GraphQL schema language specification. So guys, coding is not that much easy within this short duration. So I can give you only actually an idea of a GraphQL roadmap to the GraphQL. Coding is not possible because writing code is not easy actually as you think, because you have to first understand the fundamental concepts behind GraphQL. So what should I do? If I'm a client-side developer, I need to learn GraphQL query language. If I'm a server-side developer, I need to learn GraphQL schema language. You understand, right? Okay. Let me talk about this query language or schema language. So, which language this client side can be used, in which language the server side can be used. So the point actually you need to understand. So GraphQL technology is actually a language and a platform independent. I mean, whatever technology background you are coming from, you can learn GraphQL. For example, if I am React developer, imagine, okay. If I'm a React developer, so there is actually a client side GraphQL library. Okay. If I'm a Android developer, there is a GraphQL library. If that means actually there is a JavaScript libraries. I'm talking about there is a client-side GraphQL library. You understand, right? If I'm a React developer or if I'm Android developer, this means actually in JavaScript we have. You understand? If I'm a microservice developer, if I'm a Java Spring Boot developer, imagine. So there is a client-side library. So there is a client-side Java library. So which is actually Java library within a Spring Boot, we have it. Like if I'm a what type of developer, if it is a client side, no problem. And if I'm a server side, so if I'm a server side, you may be thinking actually the Facebook I told you who invented this technology, right? So in which language the Facebook first wrote this GraphQL implementation, either client side or server side, means the Facebook initially written this technology in JavaScript only, inside JavaScript only. So after that only the many third party people, they started writing a library for other languages. So when you think about JavaScript, 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 so the first library, okay, the first library which was available, it's called GraphQL.js. Okay, there is a library called GraphQL.js. So today, actually, in the JavaScript, we have a many more implementations. So we'll talk about that. I mean, in JavaScript, I mean, server side, if you look at GraphQL, but most popular in Node.js based one is called Apollo. Hopefully, you aware of about this Apollo GraphQL. What is this Apollo GraphQL? Apollo GraphQL is actually is a server-side GraphQL implementation. I mean, Apollo. So Apollo. So who is the Apollo? It is a framework and a platform, okay, to build server-side GraphQL API. GraphQL API. GraphQL API. Okay, I'm a Java developer. What should I do? So if I'm a Java developer, I have actually the GraphQL with the Spring Boot integration. Spring Boot integration. But even more actually, if you look at, there is a Apollo, sorry, Spring Boot with GraphQL. So there is actually a framework called DGS framework. Yes, DGS GraphQL. What is the DGS? This is actually amazing framework for Java, which again are written on the top of Spring Boot only, DGS. So this is written by Netflix, okay? Netflix Spring Boot only. Netflix Spring Boot GraphQL implementation called it DGS. So this is more popular and amazing framework, okay? So I recommend to build actually GraphQL application if you are a Java developer. I recommend DGS framework, but not vanilla GraphQL with the Spring Boot integration, which is not that much good. I tell you why, okay? So this is actually like, many frameworks available for a server side. So now if I know both, what I can understand, if both, if I want to learn, like GraphQL query language or GraphQL schema language, if you know both, actually you can play like anything in GraphQL technology. So you are a full stack GraphQL application developer. I mean, you can learn GraphQL query language separately, and you can learn yeah, so if you are new to GraphQL, first you tell me which technology you are from. Are you from a UI developer? Are you from backend developer? If you are from a UI developer, go and learn the GraphQL query language. Okay, first, okay, first start learning about the GraphQL query language. And if you are a server side developer, go and start a GraphQL schema language. Okay, a schema language. So you have to learn two languages, and I recommend to learn actually both the languages. Okay, now you may be thinking, okay, how do I start learning? Should I know any programming language in the beginning? How do I start? For example, I recommend to start with the GraphQL query language. How do I learn query language? GraphQL query language. Learning path. So for example, whoever it is, whatever technology you are coming from, learning path. From where you have to begin with query language, first you have to learn. Then how do I learn query language? Means a very simple. In the query language, there is a spec, okay? In the spec, actually, you have to learn these concepts, core concepts. So first, actually, you have to learn these are the fundamental topics. Query encapsulation, query header, query API, fields, arguments, aliases, fragments, variables, directives, mutations, and inline fragments. You may be thinking, okay, how can I test without any backend API? Don't worry. If you are going to learn, for example, if I want to test the API, REST API, what you do? You may use a fake endpoints. Am I right? Generally what we do actually without writing any code, zero code, we use a fake endpoint. As most of the REST API developers, you might find a JSON placeholder is the right place to kickstart actually the API design and all. But in REST, there is no much learning in the client side. Client side developer with respect to REST is so easy. But the challenge is in GraphQL. In the GraphQL is actually client specification. Is there is any entry? If I want to learn query language, we need API. So don't worry, there is a lot of fake endpoints are there. There is an endpoint called countries.trevorblades.com. Okay. So this endpoint, amazing endpoint to kickstart. You see that if you start actually just countries.trevorblades.com, now they will give you a tool. So you know very well actually as a REST developer, we use a client side tool like a Postman. Am I right? Okay. So this is like a Postman kind of query only. Okay. This is a kind of Postman. You see that when you are going to learn GraphQL query language, there is a syntax. You can't directly jump. Okay. You cannot learn directly. So you can use actually this tool. Imagine this tool. You have to use this tool. There is actually the countries.turboblades.com. They actually give you an endpoint automatically. But how to query data? You have to think about it. How to query data? If you want to query data. So then there is a syntax. Okay. That syntax is a very simple and easy to learn. It's like actually your JavaScript object notation. JSON syntax, or you can say JavaScript notation. So there is a syntax. Initially, I'm going to introduce, have a look at. This is a query language syntax. GraphQL query language syntax. The first you need to understand about the selection set. What do you mean by selection set? I give you concept called query language. I'm talking about the query language syntax. The first we need to understand about the syntax called selection set. What do you mean by selection set? Selection set, this is notation, selection set, selection equal to query encapsulation. So what is a selection set means? The selection set could be a query or mutation or subscription. So I told you already, query means a reading data from API, and the mutation is nothing but insert, update, delete, and subscription is nothing but query plus streaming. So you see that here the example query and selection, mutation and selection, and subscription and selection. So here I'm going to show you query. So here actually the selection, how it is going to be.
even an example. The after the selection, so here you need to mention about API name. API name. So that means a method name, which is going to return fields, fragment spread, and inline spread. Okay, inline fragments. I mean, it is going to return a fields, fragment spread, and inline. So now have a look at this is the syntax. This is a fundamental syntax. Now I'm going to start writing how to read a data. So the syntax, if you look at a query, then API name, from that API, what data you want. For example, here we have a country API. I'm going to write a query is a keyword. Then actually you can use a curly braces. Then actually you have to specify the name of the API. This API is auto complete. Okay, automatically it will come. This is countries is a method name. Imagine in Java we use a find all, save, delete, update, right? In GraphQL convention, the method name is going to be like a nouns. Okay, so countries is kind of a method name. So when I invoke a method in server, what data you want? So for example, that API may return 15 fields, but I don't want all 15 fields. For example, I want only a name of the country and country capital. Only two fields I want. So what is the meaning of this? Query is a keyword, and within that query, you are going to use a curly braces and countries. Countries is the name of the API. When I call that API, you are going to return the data back. Okay. So just I am going to send a query. Now you will able to see the response. So response in GraphQL always going to be JSON. That is a predefined structure like outside a curly braces and data. Data is a predefined. Within that data object notation, then the countries, that means an array, the list. The countries you can see that data. So it is giving actually as a what? A JSON structure. So now, for example, I don't want capital, just remove. Then it will return only name of the country. You see, this is one of the key benefit of GraphQL. GraphQL is going to tell you, hey, what you want to tell me. I will give you that data only. I don't give you unnecessary fields. Okay. So for example, capital. Now, if I'm going to add capital and if I want actually a continent, a continent, if you look at, is a nested object inside a continent. What is the name of the continent? So what I'm trying to say, what is the name of the continent? So within this countries, this is kind of your nested data structure. Within a country's API, you are going to call name is a field and capital, and continent is actually another nested API. That API, I mean, that API is going to give you a continent name. So can you see that? The countries which is going to give you a continent detail. So then actually you can write a query. So here actually the syntax without using query keyword also it will work. There is a lot of syntax sugar is there. Now we can write a query. Okay, query. So sometimes what you need actually query header. That means it's a dummy name you can give. So countries query. So this is actually your own name. You can give any name. This is called a query header. So query header is always recommended to define what is the type of query, but still this works. Okay. So now what we have done actually, we are going to invoke, this is a client side I'm talking. I'm experimenting. There is a server side API. The server already there is a GraphQL API called countries.turboblades.com. That is API is already there. I'm a client side developer. I'm exploring, how that how I can fetch data. How can I fetch data? Like what you can do, you can actually try with what? You can try with your GraphQL. That means the GraphQL query language give you a lot of syntax. By using simple syntax with the fake data, you can learn yourself. But server side, you cannot learn with the fake data. You understand, right? Now you can see the query syntax, how you can write it with the query header, how you can write a nested fields, and even with arguments and parameter. But anyhow, that is going to very deeper. So what I recommend you, actually you have to start learning how to implement, I mean how to begin with the, how to begin with what, client side. So for example, this, I mean, if you do not understand this syntax, even you cannot write code in React. I tell you, if you are React developer, that I will tell you how to write React code. I'm not going to show you any demo on React. So React with the GraphQL. So the Apollo, right, you know, Apollo team provides you GraphQL library. So I tell you here, Apollo client, GraphQL. So now you can see how to fetch query. So there is a sample code I will show you. Sample. Can you see that? This is what actually the sample code. Now this is a actually React code. Now can you see that this is GQL and all is a function, leave about it. But when we are writing this query, right, query get docs. Similarly, query countries query. So I have given an example. You can see here this countries. Now can you see that docs is an API and ID read. So now you can see here actually how to get the data in React code. So in the Apollo side, you can find out. Use query get to docs. That means the get docs is a query syntax, and use query loading error, and you can filter data. Very simple and easy to use. So that means that one. Okay, now if I am a server-side developer, how do I begin with the server-side development? So GraphQL server-side development, how do I begin with the server-side development? So if I'm going to begin with the server-side development, one second. Give me 1 second. So now if you are going to work with the server side, you need to learn about server side implementation. Okay. So that's where actually GraphQL schema language. Listen, then you have to learn about the schema language, and you can select language of your choice. Java means go with the Spring Boot with the DGS framework. And if you are coming from Node.js, most of the company, they ask Node.js background. So the Node.js means Apollo framework. Apollo is the #1 framework. So even we have an abstraction for Apollo as well. Okay, I will tell you. So you have to learn actually the schema language syntax. Then after that, you have to set up Node.js project. Node.js. So you have to learn. You see that how to set up GraphQL. You have to set up a project. You have to set up a project. In case of GraphQL server side, how do I start setting up? I tell you. So mkdir GraphQL CD GraphQL. I mean, I'm going to set up actually the GraphQL server side application. So there is a sequence of step. Okay, now GraphQL mkdir server app CD server app. So npm init. First, actually, I'm going to initialize package.json. Then actually, I'm going to install necessary dependencies. So in order to begin with, you need to install the dependency like Apollo, @Apollo server, and GraphQL. GraphQL.js. That's a core dependency. Just I will write a very simple hello world API by using actually this one. So and also we have to install. So this is mostly recommended by building using TypeScript. So I'm installing a TypeScript dependencies as well. Okay, then we have to add a TS configuration. So and mkdir src code space dot Okay, now you can look at actually there is a two dependency, Apollo server dependency, GraphQL dependency, and Node and TypeScript dependency. Then we need to create actually TS config file, config.json. There is a configuration we need to add. I mean, TypeScript code I'm going to compile and out directory is going to be test. Then we are going to install some more dependency for TS watch dependency so that you don't need to. So then we need to add some script to compile GraphQL code inside a script section. So start TS watts on success node test. I mean, after successfully compiled, I'm going to run the file called index.js. Okay. Now I'm going to start writing the server side GraphQL application, which is called SDL. I mean, there is a language I told you in server side. There is a language called the language is called server side. I mean, GraphQL schema language. I told you this is called a GraphQL schema language specification that you need to learn. So where actually you have to learn about schemas and types. So that is actually called as SDL language. Okay, SDL, schema definition language. GraphQL schema definition language. That language you have to learn. Very simple. That you can follow actually this course as well. But anyhow, this course is very basic. You can easily, but very interesting and very good. Okay, so now as per SDL process, first we need to define schema. Then you have to write a business logic for the schema, which is called resolver. And we have to start Apollo server. So now I'm going to write actually the first code called app or index.js. Index.ts, sorry, TS, because it is a TypeScript. Okay. Now, let's see here. I'm going to first import Apollo server. These two dependencies must be there. I'm writing as actually the very simple hello world schema. Here you can see, just I'm going to define a schema. What is a schema means? The schema is nothing but how your API is going to be. By using this API, you can implement, I mean, by using this schema, you can implement in any language. The schema is completely language independent. So what is the meaning of this? You are writing a query. Query means a read. So type is keyword, I mean a data type. Type is type equal to type is actually the query. What is the name of the query? What is the name of the query? Called a hello. Hello is a method name and the return type is what? String. The return type is going to be a string. Now you are going to write a business logic for that query, which is called resolver, in Apollo. Resolver is nothing but business logic. The resolver is going to be an object. Inside we have a keyword called query. For this query implementation, I'm writing return hello GraphQL. Okay, now we are going to start server. I mean, we need to deploy schema and bind the resolver. By using Apollo server type defs, there is a type def configuration that is passed. This schema is passed and also resolver. We are connecting together and we are going to start actually Apollo server. I mean, so anyhow, the GraphQL itself is a kind of web application only, which is running on Express server behind the scene. Now you are going to start, you see that npm start. Now the code got compiled. Okay, I think actually there is a one more configuration we need to add called a module type, and we need to add actually Okay, sorry, type module. So this is actually the Node.js feature. Okay, type module. So that configuration we need to add. Okay, now I'm going to restart once again. Yes, our code is ready. What happened? Okay, I think actually, sorry. So here we have a module. So that we need to add it. Type module is already there. Now I need to restart. So our server is ready and which is running in which one 4000. Apollo server looks like they also provide inbuilt client tool like a Postman. Okay, let's open that client tool. Now I'm going to open that client tool. Now have a look at Apollo server. Now it is initializing. Yes, now we have a 4000. So now I am a client developer because I'm going to test actually the query hello query hello underscore query header. So what is the API name? Hello. So now just if you run it, now you will able to see the output. Can you see that the response hello GraphQL? So which is coming actually as an output. You understand, right? So which is coming as an output. Okay, this is a very simple hello world. Now what if I have an object, later we have to this API need to talk to database, or if this API can talk to the existing REST APIs, can talk to REST API, can talk to database. From the database only we finally get the record. Finally we get the data. So now actually I'm going to write another um, hard-coded data with respect to object. Object type one. Okay, I'm going to take this object. Let me talk about what is this object is all about. So the final example over here. Okay, now actually here we are going to define schema. You can see here that schema called user. I mean, you are going to define like a table structure, like user ID. Here you can see here something different. This you must have learned before. I mean, you must learn schema, SDL concepts you must have learned. This is actually ID is a data type called ID data type. First name, last name, and we have actually query. Query means API. What is the API? User API, and return type is going to be user. Now this is mock data for user data, ID, name, and point. So now this API is going to return user. Let's see here. I'm going to refresh. Okay, now we are going to get a new data called query. You see here query get user info, user hyphen info. Okay, query header, and the name of the API is called user. Am I right? The same API name, as I mentioned already, this is a method name. The same method name, user. It's not like verb convention. Now I want ID and name, last name. For example, I want first name. You see, what is my requirement? I need only ID and first name. No problem. It will return only ID and first name. If I want last name, no problem, it will return last name. If I want you first name and last name, no worries, you will get it. And if you want other data, whatever data, for example, I want points, no problem, you will get it. And if I want a status, of course, you can get it status now. So whatever the information you want, that information you will able to get it. Now this is a client, as a client, we are testing this API. Now the same code you can go and drop inside your client code. For example, as I told already in React, for example, if you are writing a React code, okay, if you are writing a React code, GraphQL query, GraphQL React means in the React, very simple. You see that React code anyhow, you know very well. I mean, if you are going to work with client side means Apollo provides you library. You can see for Angular, there is a library. For the Vue, there is a library. For S-Velvet, there is a library. For Ember, there is a library. For even mobile application, Java native Android with Java and Kotlin also, we have a library. So that you can refer this one. So now you can see the query section. Very simple, you are going to get docs, right? This code, you see that this is a React code. I will show you React. I mean, if you are not from React, sorry, but anyhow, just I'm giving you an idea. This is actually React code. You see that one of the client side code I'm telling you. Now, the code which we have tested, right? The same thing you can drop over there. Here, that's it. Get users. You see, get user info. Now here you can pass that get user info. Get users, okay? Get users, that variable. Now, if you pass, then you will get actually loading, error, and data. Then you can docs, instead of you will get what? Users. In case it should be here, any of this UI code you can think of. In case if it is a single data, how the data is coming, and in case of an array of data, how the data is coming. So dropping in the client side code is so easy. I mean, as a client side developer or server side developer, particularly server side developer must to know client side as well. Why? Because they have to test, right, the API, how it is working. Okay. Okay, now we have understood actually how to begin with actually the GraphQL application. So you can use Apollo GraphQL as a server-side platform, a platform building exclusive the server-side development. Okay, so now actually I'm going to talk about one more concept related to GraphQL. Okay, related to GraphQL. Everybody aware about microservice development, am I right? So how to build microservices? Microservices are independent application, you know very well. That application is can be actually a collection of REST applications. Okay, then all REST applications, they can talk each other. So some microservices completely REST based, and some microservices REST plus MOM based, kind of a hybrid approach. Am I right? Hybrid approach, MOM based approach, microservice based approach. So if it is a microservice development, pure microservice in GraphQL, I mean the platform API model is actually complete GraphQL means how can I do that? So you can build independent GraphQL application, but how you can communicate all individual GraphQL applications? So there is a technology called federation. So that you need to understand. What is the technology? The technology is called federations. So now you can find out what is a federation is all about. So what is a federation? A federation, so there is a technology called Apollo federation. Apollo only providing that Apollo GraphQL Federation. So Federation is a technology. This is a very advanced technology. What is Apollo Federation? Okay. So Apollo Federation is nothing but the building microservice driven applications in GraphQL. So there is a lot of technology behind this. Okay. That is, first you need to learn GraphQL query language, GraphQL schema language. After learning, the third level of journey is federation. Okay, you have to learn query language, okay, and schema language. That means server side. Then the advanced one is called a federation. Advanced one is called a federation. Okay, so as actually in modern days, if you want to upgrade, to the GraphQL implementations, okay, then you have to begin with query language, schema language, and federations. So I would like to see actually the questions what you have asked. Yeah, fragments, Vishal Mohan, fragments is a kind of concept that we need to look at when we talk GraphQL in detail. So that is actually fragments generally is used for reusability purpose.
Sorry to interrupt, Subramanian.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, please do write your questions in a Q&A tab. So, Subramanian, are we done with the
Yes, we
yeah.
are done. Yeah.
Okay. So, guys, please write down your questions in a Q&A tab, and do fill our session feedback form as well, which I am launching right now. And Subramanian, we have few questions. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start with the first one. Vishal is asking if we can connect internally, I mean backend, then we can use GraphQL or REST.
Yeah. So the question is internally means what?
Okay, Vishal, please write down what do you mean by internally. So till then, we'll move to next question. So can GraphQL be used with relational database like MySQL or PostgreSQL, or is it more suited for NoSQL databases?
So actually, the GraphQL is just an API. You can connect with any database. There is no kind of you can work with a SQL or you can work with a NoSQL. It's just a API like a REST. Okay, so there is no directly connected with the database.
Okay. Subramanian, if you want, you can stop like sharing your screen as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Vishal is writing meaning backend to backend. So he was saying if we can connected internally, I mean backend, then we can use GraphQL or REST. So we asked him now, what
Yeah,
he mean by
I can answer for this question.
yes.
So he's asking actually the architecture, right? Architecture point of view.
Hmm.
So let me explain you where the GraphQL fits. For example, you have a system, okay? That system, let us say, is a microservices.
Hmm.
So we have a many microservices in place. For example, I have a one microservice is called a product microservice, okay? Which is written in REST. Okay, and also there is another microservice is called a comments microservice, the product comments, which is also written in REST. So now your company is asking actually to connect the product and the comments microservice. I mean, I need to create a one more service. That service to accumulate actually the each product with the comments. I mean, I need to accumulate the comments of the product. Okay, So then actually we need actually kind of one more service you can you have to write. In this place you can use a GraphQL. Okay. So what you can do, so just you can fetch all product data. Okay, you can create a query product data. Plus, actually, you can combine actually with the comments data. Then actually the end users, right, who are building a client-side application, they can talk to the one single endpoint, GraphQL endpoint. They don't need to talk to or more endpoints to get data. I mean, generally speaking, the GraphQL can act as an integration layer. So most of the time, in real-time systems, actually the GraphQL is acting as an integration layer. So GraphQL can talk to the other REST APIs or a database, and it is going to act as a kind of a centralized data provider. Okay.
Okay, can we move to another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, Vishal is asking, what is fragment uses? I am little bit confused.
Yeah, fragment is an internal concept. In this session, actually, it is really difficult to explain because that is an advanced topic in the GraphQL specification. So if
Oh,
you want to understand GraphQL fragment, I mean a query language fragment, we have to learn everything from basic things you have to learn. So that is one of the topic inside GraphQL. So maybe that is not a generic, so that is very difficult to explain.
okay. So, another question, Ashutosh is asking, Supernode and its usage. Maybe he wants to know about Supernode.
Yeah, supernode is nothing but that's what I told you. Concept is called federation, right? In federation, so you are going to federate many GraphQL uh, services into one single node, which is called as a supernode. So which connects all the nodes into one. So that supernode is implemented by using called routers.
Okay, so next question is, I am new to GraphQL. What resources or learning path would you recommend to get hands-on experience?
Yeah, as I mentioned already, there are two specifications, major specifications. GraphQL query language, the website is graphql.org website. Okay, there you have to learn the query language, and also there is a schema language that is available separate specification, but you can look at the GraphQL schema language step by step with implementation Apollo GraphQL official documentation.
Okay, let's move to next question. So Vinod is asking, can you please explain pagination functionality in GraphQL?
Yeah, pagination, if you look
Oh,
at is pagination is a UI feature. It is already there because the GraphQL internally implements caching technique, okay, by default. So by using caching and that you can fetch whatever the record you want.
okay, next question Rakesh is asking, can this be learned by SQL developers?
No, SQL developers little difficult if you do not know any programming language. I mean, you must know at least any one programming language, at least Java or a JavaScript or whatever language. I mean, it is not a straightforward. It is a kind of API development. You must have an experience in API development.
Okay, so next question. What are the best GraphQL client libraries for React, Angular, and Vue.js?
Yeah, that you I just for that I have already answered. You can look at actually the client library in Apollo documentation.
Okay,
So
okay.
Apollo they provide you actually library for all client
Mhm.
side library, including Android and iOS
Yeah.
development as well.
Okay, Rakesh is saying thank you to you. Okay, so another question is GraphQL is a required skill for full stack developer, or is it still considered an additional skill?
No, actually, the GraphQL is one of the core technology in microservice development. Of course, it is required.
Okay. So, Akhil is asking, how do you handle authentication and authenticization of GraphQL API?
Yeah, so Apollo GraphQL provides you a separate module for that, okay, that you can look at. Authentication and authorization is a part of the implementation side. It is in GraphQL, Apollo GraphQL provides exclusive API for that.
Okay. Mayank is asking, any effect of AI on GraphQL, and is there any relation with Neo4j?
No, there is no connection with any database like Neo4j. Okay, the Neo4j is a different technologies altogether. It is a kind of a GraphDB. So there is no connection with the GraphDB and the GraphQL. So
Okay.
AI is everywhere. We can't say actually the AI is not actually part of GraphQL.
Okay, Ashutosh is asking a GraphQL to gRPC integration question mark.
Yeah, you see that gRPC is another API technology. Of course, you can connect actually the gRP with the GraphQL, GraphQL with the REST with gRPC. So that connections, we need just still a client libraries. Okay, if you have the client library, you can connect from anywhere.
Okay, Jatin is asking which one to use, Apollo or DRS by Netflix for from schema language perspective in conjunction with Spring Reactive microservice architecture.
So Apollo is a Node.js, okay, Node.js based framework. So you don't need to connect with. If you want to implement in Java, so DGS framework can be used, not DRS. That is a DGS, okay.
Okay, okay. So Vishal is asking, we have caching in NGRX library. Then what is use of GraphQL caching?
So what is NGRX?
I don't know. He has
So
written.
NGRX with respect to Angular, you mean to say?
Vishal, kindly answer, Vishal. Yes, he's saying yes.
Actually, if you look at NGRX, is not actually integrated library, right? It is an optional library. So anyhow, the GraphQL by default they provide you caching. By
Oh,
default, it is providing if you are integrating with Angular. NGRX is a kind of a state management library.
okay. So Akhil is asking, how do you monitor and troubleshoot performance issue in a GraphQL API? Doesn't it add another layer over REST and introduce performance overhead?
No, actually, if you look at, if you go with Apollo server, right? Apollo has a production, Apollo Enterprise. I mean, the cloud services they are providing. If you
Mhm.
are going to deploy your GraphQL application in production with Apollo, so they give you tools, independent tools. Though by using those tools, you can troubleshoot performance and monitoring. Okay, all the things you can do that.
Okay, so now we have our last question. So reusability fragment, please give example.
That's what that is again, I have answered that question already. The fragment is not part of discussion right now.
Okay, okay, Subramanian. I think we are done with our Q&A part as well. So, do you have anything to convey to our audience who are watching you right now or who are going to watch you after some time?
So for my side, nothing.
Okay, then. Okay, thank you so much, Subramanian, for delivering this session. And we are grateful for your time. And thank you, everyone who has joined us today. And thank you for being a part of this learning experience. If any one of you still have any question, please feel free to reach out to us or connect with Subramanian directly. And this session is recorded, and recording will be available on our YouTube channel and LinkedIn account as well. And I have shared link as well with you guys, so you can revisit it anytime. So we look forward to having you join us again in upcoming session. Until then, take care, keep learning, and have an amazing day. And once again, I want to say thank you to Subramanian and all. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Have a
Thank you.
nice day.
Everyone is saying thank you to you in a chat box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bye bye, Subramanian.